Thank you, Jenny, for that intro, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Perth Advocates for the Earth for inviting me to present Animals Angels. For those of you who don't know about Animals Angels, I'll briefly explain how we made and continue to make a difference, not just to individual animals, but to thousands of animals. And I'm about to describe some of the work which has never been presented to anyone. We're what I like to describe as quiet achievers. Before I do, though, I'd like to share with you a brief insight into the industry. Now, generally speaking, the differing sections in the farmed animal industry are quite fractured. It's also very much a closed shop. So there's no centralised controlling system for what goes on. So, example, within the saleyard industry, there's no main group which has power over any of the yards. There are two main associations representing yards which have some capacity to exert influence over their members, but no group with overarching power. Therefore, we're faced with a situation whereby if a yard somewhere in Australia is failing to comply with their legal obligations, the only ways available to remedy their non-compliance is by clients refusing to use the yard or pressure from agents or association. Now, it's not likely to occur because when push comes to shove, the industry doesn't really like to police itself. They think that fixing the problems are the responsibility of regulatory agencies. And the trouble with that is it doesn't appear to be effective. So when I think about how we can make a difference, driving change springs to mind. The way I see it, there are three ways of driving change. Cooperatively, that's proactively engaging with industry and government to encourage and educate for compliance to current laws and regulations. Legally, that's changing and improving laws and regulations, and we push for change by showing the agencies and the industry how and why the existing laws fail to protect animals, and with that we show up any lack of enforcement. And we can use education. That's exposing practices which the community finds unacceptable, and in turn creating the opportunities for change. Animals Angels aim to make a difference by changing a culture within an industry, and we do it by using a mix of working cooperatively with industry and the legal compliance approach. Our charter in Australia is to monitor activities relevant to the transport and treatment of animals used in commercial purposes, so that's sheep and cattle. We attend saleyards, observe short and long distance transports, and we used to attend the loadings at the port with the aim to ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations and to report non-compliance to relevant authorities. Over the last 10 years, Animals Angels have regularly submitted detailed reports and complaints to both federal and state governments in order to raise awareness, have incidents investigated, and request for meaningful enforcement of legislation. So how do we make change? Well, if we wanted to know how to make a difference, first Animals Angels have to identify our elements of our focus. For me, it was saleyards transport, and part of transport is live export. Familiarise ourselves with the industry players within those areas. Who has responsibility for what? How does the industry interact with each other? Familiarise ourselves with the politics and the bureaucracy. Who has control over the Act? How well is it enforced? Now, when we started here in 2003, there was, and to a degree still is, the absence of consistent and effective oversight for animal welfare. And finally, we had to determine a realistic course of action that would achieve tangible and positive welfare outcomes for animals in our focus. Now, an example of this was in 2005, an Animals Angels team stayed with the animals during 2 full days of loading. So from the start to finish, we were there. Every truck that transported animals to the port for loading was recorded. Hundreds of photos were taken. And that material formed the basis of our first report, which was the start of many more to come. Now, for the first time ever, a group meticulously reported the activities during a loading, And for the first time ever, a group demonstrated not only were they capable of presenting a well-substantiated document detailing compelling evidence of non-compliance and breaches, but the way they operated was virtually impossible to ignore. Now, around that same time, we spent days and days at saleyards in WA gathering data, which was then given to the State Animal Welfare Unit. Now, as I mentioned before, changing legislation and regulations is one way of driving change, but in the attempt to persuade the legislators that the existing law fails to protect, you must present indisputable facts, proof. And this is where it gets tricky, because you must also show that it is due to a lack of meaningful enforcement that the law fails to achieve its aim, and that is to protect animals. Our reports provide a basis upon which we are able to engage industry and government and remain integral to demonstrating that the laws and/or enforcement is not working. Now, sometimes governments ignore this info and sometimes they listen. In 2011 and 2012, we were at saleyards in Victoria, and as a part of our process, we reported our observations to the state government, and they listened. And as a result, the saleyard industry, along with the Victorian government, initiated the drafting of the standards and guidelines for saleyards. Now, this was a marked success for Animals Angels because our work gave rise to the creation of additional laws to specifically address animals and their welfare in saleyards. Victoria started the ball rolling, and the rest of the nation are prepared to take them on. Well, that's great. It really is good. Now, our reports over the years have resulted in raised awareness and general changes in behaviour towards animals. And the following points are a few of our significant influences which achieve step-by-step improvements. In 2006, we secured the first successful prosecution of cruelty for the electrical shock prodding to the face of a sheep. A significant win with a stern warning for consequences for those who mishandle animals thereafter. Our work highlighting poor handling initiated courses in low-stress handling of animals be made readily available for stevedores and others within industry. In 2008, we were invited to participate at a saleyard AGM in Rockhampton, Queensland. I don't think any other advocate has ever been asked. We were invited by the Western Australia Meat Industry Authority a few years back to participate in discussions on the new Mouchet yard. And for us, water and sale pens was high on our agenda. A few years ago, we presented animal welfare to WA Police through the now closed Rural Crime Unit, or Stock Squad, and we were also asked to participate at the Mouchet Saleyard Codes of Practise initiative. In 2011, we were invited to ALMA, which is their AGM, to speak on animal welfare in saleyards. To our knowledge, we've again been the only welfare group to do so. And most of the photos in the current Fit to Load guide belong to Animals Angels. We've provided footage to DAFWA, which is the Department of Food and Agriculture and Food WA, for their animal handling and Fit to Load video. Animals Angels were invited to be a member of the Federal Livestock and Production Animal Working Group of the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. We participated this year, again, in a panel discussion at the Australian Livestock Markets Association Saleyard AGM. Now, I've just returned from that event, and I was really pleased at the positive attitude expressed by members towards change within their industry. An accredited Eastern States training provider asked us to review their course that they offer to saleyard staff on the handling of animals and emergency euthanasia in saleyards. Animals Angels have also been asked to join an ethics committee in the Northern Territory, which we've accepted. And we've also entered discussions with selling agents so they can examine their processes and practices in the yards they work in. Now, because of our credibility and accepted experience in live export, which is because of the time we've spent at the port, Animals Angels was the only group besides RSPCA to be contacted to meet with the farmer review team. Now, at that meeting, there were lengthy discussion on how the Fremantle system fails animals. That's animals we believe to be not fit to be delivered to the port, which breaches federal regulations. A farmer review team recommended that the Fremantle system be reviewed separately, and a committee was set up, and I was asked to meet with that committee and submit reports. Of importance to that was the fact their findings vindicated the points we had raised. The following points are a few of the positive direct impacts. I was waiting for it to hit my head. The following points are a few of the positive direct impacts we've achieved. In January 2008, we trailed a loaded sheep truck from WA to South Australia. That's about 2,000, 3,000 k's. Some of the sheep had been denied water for 72 hours. This started a series of actions in motion to address deficiencies over the control of water deprivation. And one of those actions agreed was to retain animals in saleyards in WA to ensure that they have for an extra day water, feed and rest before they're transported on such a journey. Now this policy directly delivers a positive impact to thousands of animals. Our consistent reminders is partly responsible for water troughs being installed in all pens at the new saleyard in Katanning, and Mushay will be installing water troughs in their sale pens in the next year. We sent out a letter to all Australian yards, saleyards and agents in January this year, and as a result, quite a big yard came back to us and said, we've implemented some major changes in our yard. Thank you for your letter. We, of course, thanked them. It will make a difference to thousands of animals. We've also been asked to visit a yard which experiences a massive amount of animal welfare problems, asking for our advice. How do we clean this up? And a good bit of news, as a direct result of our attendance at the port, Animals Angels submitted a complaint to the then regulator in charge of the Animal Welfare Unit concerning the condition of reject sheep at the port. Now this was followed up by an investigation, after which charges were laid against a pet food slaughterhouse, the owner of a sheep export feedlot and the manager of the feedlot. The case will be heard on September the 2nd. This case goes to show exactly why monitoring is vital, and you can appreciate why the export industry doesn't want Animals Angels at the port. And lastly, in July 2012, Animals Angels lodged an application in the Federal Court of Australia for judicial review concerning a decision made by DAF over a shipment of sheep and goats in 2008. In other words, we're taking DAF to court. The case against DAF is currently within the court, so I can't discuss it. But our action is consistent with our belief that any farmed animal business must be compliant to the laws that are relevant and be transparent, open and accountable. So fingers crossed for October 28. Animals Angels is now recognised and accepted as a major and credible stakeholder within the farmed animal industry in Australia. We've undertaken hundreds of visits to saleyards around Aussie, trailed three trucks interstate, and have spent over 1,000 hours at the port monitoring activities, observing the millions of animals who enter the port, into the port for the Middle East. Change isn't fast. It takes time, hard work, patience, diligence, and a focus on evidence. But our work is paying off. So if I was asked my advice by anyone wishing to become involved in making a change for the better, be professional in your approach, do your research, let your passion fuel your motivation, but let the facts fuel your action. Act strategically with knowledge and consideration of the consequences to others, and always question, what change, if any, will my actions deliver to animals? Because only then can you make a lasting and worthwhile difference. Thank you.